I'm going to go with Denver.
Okay. Interesting.
It feels too high, but also it feels like right. Jokic is incredible. Like Jokic alone will keep their window open for at least a couple more years. But the challenge is we've already seen, I don't knock them for losing Bruce Brown. They did not have the ability to pay Bruce Brown because this is where I caution everybody. We can all talk about great value contracts and how amazing of a signing they were. And holy cow, they got this guy for $6 million or whatever. That's all good until he plays really great and you then can't pay him because you have no bird rights and there's no way to offer him what he's worth and anything like that. So that's where, that's just kind of one of my challenges. Like to go back to the Bucks, everybody loves, myself included, that they got Gary Trent Jr. on a minimum. Well, if Gary Trent Jr. is anywhere near as good as we all think, he's probably not on a minimum next year, especially if Milwaukee plays well. And that became a one-year thing. Right. That's kind of the Bruce Brown situation. Where I do knock him is they let Kentavious Caldwell-Pope go. I don't want to hear any of the, second apron and stuff, baloney. You could have signed him. You didn't need to use the taxpayer MLE on Dario Saric. You didn't need to give Westbrook a second year and a player option. Like, these were just short-sighted decisions on those two guys specifically. And if you had them both on one-year minimum deals at just over $2 million, that feels a lot better than having them combined $8 million this year. Maybe you can go an extra $3 or $4 million for Caldwell Pope and keep him. I'm not sure where Jamal Murray's
at. You were calling out earlier, I think.
What's that?
Denver. This is the team you were calling out earlier in terms of when you have the window, go for it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're in it. Like, why are you letting guys walk away that are important players to your team, right? Like you've had the best starting five in the NBA for a few years running now, and you let one of those guys walk away. I like Christian Brown. I don't know if Christian Brown's ready to be a starter, and they clearly don't either because there's already news coming out of Nuggets, like training camp and media days all happening right now for them. But there's already news of, hey, Peyton Watson might be looked at in the starting group, and maybe they're hoping Julian Strawther can step forward. Well, all right, wait a minute. I thought we were all sold on Christian Brown's the guy. That's why we let Caldwell Pope go. I just, maybe they know something about Kentavious Caldwell Pope that none of the rest of us know. I'll always give the team the benefit of the doubt on that. But I'm worried about Jamal Murray. The last two times we've seen him, high pressure, high level basketball, he's been terrible. He was terrible in the playoffs. He was really bad in the Olympics, almost invisible in the Olympics. Aaron Gordon needs a new contract. Michael Porter Jr. is good. But what happens when Michael Porter Jr. needs his next contract? And they're like, we don't really want to give you a max deal again. Where are we going with that? That's where this just feels like, again, we have a clock on this. And this one really feels like you better start figuring it out around Jokic, because I continue to say, I don't think Nikola Jokic is ever going to walk in and be like, I don't want to play in Denver anymore. Trade me away. But I could see Nikola Jokic being like, won a bunch of MVPs. I won a title. I'm just going to go home and race horses. Yep. I'm not going to play until I'm 40 years old. Why do I want to do this and have this aggravation?
Yeah, for a guy who clearly doesn't really even want to be in America sometimes. It just can't wait to go back home, which, not faulting him. That's the biggest thing. And I had the Nuggets and one other team where the team I had the hardest time kind of figuring out where I had them. I ended up having the Nuggets a little bit lower here. Well, actually, maybe not that much lower. Maybe like a spot or two lower. I don't know how much longer Jokic is going to play. He's 29 years old right now. If he walked away from the game at 31, would anybody be shocked?
Yep.
I don't think so. Like, probably he'll probably see out the rest of this contract and then and then at that point. But yeah, I don't see Jokic playing until he's 37 in the NBA. I could be wrong. I hope I'm wrong. I love watching him play, but I'm with you. And then in terms of the KCP stuff, right? It's so easy to sort of look at the cap, like see an Excel spreadsheet of all this stuff and be like, well, they had to let somebody walk at some point. Like, if it wasn't KCP, then their risk, maybe losing Aaron Gordon, not being able to afford him, because then that would take them into the second tax potentially, and Michael Porter Jr. is worth X amount of dollars and all this stuff. And then immediately you remind yourself that, no, if they wanted to pay these guys, they could. They just don't want to, right? Yep. And then as soon as that comes up, you're like, you know what? Yeah, it's going to be really expensive, but guess what? You have an all-time player, Nikola Jokic. Make it expensive. Figure it out later. It's worth it. It's worth all the money that you're paying for. But they didn't go that way. I'll
also say this too.
Yeah.
Your family owns multiple sports franchises and you own Walmart. Like, don't tell me you don't have the money.
And the other franchises stink.
Yeah.
You have one good one.
Yeah. Yeah, like what? Like I don't want to hear that it's anything. And yet they operate like they are this tough luck small market team, but like the way the Thunder did in the early 2000s, where it's like, well, we just can't keep James Harden. It's just too expensive for us. And I certainly don't want to get into relitigating all that, but it's like, I don't want to hear that out of OKC, or out of Denver rather. Like you could have afforded to keep him, and I know people are like, well, didn't they offer him the same deal Orlando did? Yeah, so offer him more. Like, what are we doing? And again, if it really is a concern, why did you give Saric and Westbrook the deals you gave them? You didn't need it. Who else was going to give those guys those contracts? Nobody. Right. Everybody else in the league would have been like, you want to do it for a minimum? Great, come on in. And what else were they going to do? Say no? They weren't going to sit until mid-October unsigned and then be like, all right, we'll jump on now. Like they would have taken 1 year minimum deals and figured it out. Like both guys have kind of been there. So yeah, but I won't go too far down that rabbit hole.
And at risk of going even further down, now that you can have private equity invest into your franchise, there's ways to make up this money. Yes, you're parting with a percentage of ownership, but like if you're worried about like initial costs, then like go get BlackRock investors to do something and just call it, help them pay for it. That said, I think the Nuggets front office would tell you, listen, we don't even need KCP. We got all these guys ready to go. We outscored opponents by 14.5 points per 100 possessions last year. The core four minus KCP, right? And the year before that, we were even better. And then I would push back like, well, it was only 400 possessions, according to Cleaning the Glass. So it's a really small sample size, yet they believe, evidently, that their four, Jokic, Murray, Porter, and Gordon, is good enough that they don't need KCP. And by the way, they might absolutely be right, and they might look like geniuses for this, like you already kind of said. Maybe they know something that we don't. But they need one of those guys to pop, the guys that you already talked about, and they're going to need to re-sign Aaron Gordon. And maybe there's a Porter trade down the road where you could break up that salary or something like that. But I do think that as long as this team has Jokic and Jamal Murray, who are both locked up through 2028, they're going to be a contender, which is why they're on this list. But this is right about probably where they need to be. I had them, like I said, a little bit lower just because I think some other teams are a little bit more desperate because I still believe in the Denver core. But and financially, they're actually in an okay spot if they want to be. It's just whether or not they want to be or not.